Act in action. One integration, two mindsets, only one sees the future. Another security approval. A new software as a service platform arrives for security approval. They said it connects the CRM to a data enrichment API. Fetch your trusty list of mandatory security controls and you're ready to go down the list. ISO 27001? Check. Role-based access? Check. VPN tunnel SSL? Check. Logging? It's enabled, but we don't have a way to verify it. Tokens? Yep, we can have tokens, we rotate them, but there is some downtime. SSO? No, that's not supported. But they do have an admin interface where our administrators upload provisioning information via CSV file to their admin interface. So here we are. Security gate passed, project approved. Time passes, and then it blows up. A vendor update accidentally disables the API rate limits, and it misprovisions identity certificates. Suddenly, your CRM gets flooded with enriched profiles for someone else's client. There's over 11,000 mismatched records appended to your production data. Nobody notices for 48 hours. Then sales complains, then marketing complains, then legal, and then the board. By the time incident response gets the call, the data has been exported to a third-party agency. Your customers have been used to train their AI. Internal audit has filed a breach review, and the CISO is pulled into high-urgency conversations with people 2 pay grades above their bosses. Why? Because your company sells high-end luxury fashion, but this incident just sent 11,374 customers an ad for assault rifles with a politically charged message. Almost 2,500 of them unsubscribed, 300 of them with vocal complaints on social media with pictures of your ad and your brand. And that meant that 10 million in total customer lifetime value just vanished in 48 hours. But it doesn't have to work that way. I'd like to introduce you to the ACT Anti-Fragile Blueprint. Assess so that you can see the system for what it is. Contain so that you can design to absorb what can break. And traction to enable behavior that sustains flow and delivers business results. Once you act, you can see clearly. Once you take action, you can do the right things. And once you have traction, you can make sure it sticks. It's not just a method. It's a self-reinforcing cycle. From collapse to clarity, constraint, confidence, and ultimately flow. This is the loop that allows you to finally break the cycle of reactive security so that you can have time to focus on what truly matters most. So let's walk through that same security review again from a different perspective, using the ACT Anti-Fragile Blueprint instead. The first thing we're going to do is assess, which means we want to see the system for what it really is. Before launch, security joins product and vendor teams to ask a different set of questions. What does this actually do? What does it consume to work? What does it create that matters? And most importantly, what happens if it breaks? And they discover some pretty interesting things in response to those questions. Here's what the answers reveal. The enrichment is unpredictable. The logging is unreliable. The service creates dynamic ads. And the customer's data is used as training input so that those ads are correct. Once those ads are created, they're pushed live to paid media. And the whole CRM campaign is what drives quarterly returns. So here's where the security team does something different. Based on what they found, they're going to focus on what they can actually control, mitigating the impact of failure, not chasing causes or threats. And that's what contain is all about, because contain is where we design to absorb what can break. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to fix our picture, because one of the big things that was missing was that this actually drives paid media. So we put that in the picture, and now we have something that we can really work with to figure out what containment is going to look like. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in a 12-hour review sandbox that ensures that nothing bad gets pushed into the paid media automatically. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to create some automation rules to detect whether or not there's any drift in the messaging or alignment between what we do and what we believe and the messages that we're putting out to our customers. Finally, we're going to make sure we've got some sort of rollback pipeline in place so that if something does get into that review sandbox that shouldn't be there, it's not a surprise. We're prepared for it and we just roll it back and we're good to go. Arguably, most importantly, we know now that we need to make some updates to our privacy policy because if our customers' data is being used to train AI, we need to make sure that that's already explicitly there and give our customers an option to opt out or actually just go ahead and accept that. The point here is that all of these changes are possible without any API rewrites, no new vendors, and no new updated contracts. It's just governed behavior under stress because it's based on what really matters. And we already know that the basic security controls are in place for the system, but we also know that those controls can fail at any time and without any warning through no fault of the vendor or our own. So if we aren't prepared for when that happens, then we're going to end up back with our world blowing up and all that lost revenue. The final part is traction, where we enable behavior that it sustains flow. What this really means is that security, the vendor, and the product teams come up with a different set of agreements. So for any vendor updates, we're going to do a light audit and make sure that we understand what changed and none of our assumptions were invalidated. We're going to do known bad data tests at least monthly. And if it makes sense, we're going to automate these and do them continuously. But the main thing is that success means no surprises. It's not that nothing changes. And that is really a fundamentally different way of thinking in the ACT model than in traditional security. Because in traditional security, the goal is to make it secure. And in ACT, it's to make it survivable. Our focus in traditional security, controls and checklists. Our focus with ACT, purpose and consequences, because that's what really matters. These things don't exist for no reason at all. ACT helps you identify and focus on making sure that that reason and that purpose is actually delivered. Our posture, reactive approval. Something comes to us, we review it, we send it on its way, or we reject it and say, go back and fix something. With ACT, it's proactive design. So we're designing not so that the system can be secure. We're designing so that the system is actually reliable. And even when it breaks, we know what's going to happen. We're prepared for it. And we can just deal with the consequences as a normal part of business operations. Finally, the results are quite different. The traditional results, we just keep hiding more and more fragility that nobody wants to admit because we're not looking at the whole system. We're just looking at individual controls, checklists, and system components. But ACT, we're looking at all of the governance relationships that matter for delivering the result that matters to the organization. And that means we've got visible, governable risk, which is totally different than what we end up with the traditional approach. There's a different cost as well. So in the traditional approach, what we saw was data sources and APIs. But with ACT, what we're focusing on are impact paths and dependencies. They may seem like they're the same thing, but as I hope you saw from the example, it really doesn't mean that we think about it the same way and that we're going to get the same results. What we did in the past with the traditional model, we sign off on controls. Do you have this or not? These are the controls, and if you have those, we're good to go. With ACT, we're mapping the consequences. Are these really important to the organization? And if they are, what do we need to do to make sure that we have the robustness and the reliability and the resilience proportional to what it means to the organization that these things happen? What we get with the traditional model, well, we get embarrassment and cleanup because we don't know what's really going wrong or what can go wrong until after it does. So that's why we're always reactive. But with ACT, we get preparedness and agility because, in fact, we're doing the incident response before the incident even happens, before the system is actually even live. What it costs? Well, the traditional model from our example took 7 to 10 people 3 to 5 days to clean up, and it resulted in 10 million in lost total lifetime value for customers because they left. and we have to get those back. And it's not just about the money, it's about the money over time. So if you want to really learn how to see the future, ACT isn't just a response model, it's a clarity model. It shows you where the impact will land before it hits. So the next time you think you've signed something off as secure, ask if you've mapped what happens when it fails. Because fragility hides in frictionless onboarding. Resilience hides in unasked questions. Once you do, it links technology changes to the right security controls that ensure tangible business value is delivered. ACT closes the loop between security and business value, so it's impossible to ignore or circumvent without knowing the consequences of your decisions. People may still choose to bypass security controls, but at least this way, they know exactly what that means and what it's going to mean to them, what it's going to mean to the organization. And that means that it's a risk-based decision for real. It's not just based on some theory and probabilities. Now you've seen the core of ACT: assess, contain, traction. You've seen how ACT reframes what security work is, and maybe, for the first time, you saw the full incident before it happened. But don't mistake a good demo for the whole system, because here's what else it takes to actually achieve sustained traction. Why your dashboards keep lying, even when the numbers go up. You're told you're winning if your risk counts go down, your backlog gets closed, and your mean time to recover stays flat. But ACT shows that your system is biased to ignore real fragility, and your metrics are built to make it worse. The truth? If your dashboards aren't creating daily behavioral decisions, they're glorified vanity mirrors. Next, how our success criteria are quietly destroying our security programs. Most teams aim to pass audits or deliver controls, but ACT traction requires security to define resilience patterns, not project milestones. Until your organization knows how to measure change capacity, you're still just making prettier slides for the next executive meeting. Why the you build it, you secure it model creates high trust disasters. Empowering teams is great, but in ACT, unstructured ownership is worse than command and control. Traction requires operational ownership plus calibrated escalation models, because confidence without governance is how cascading failure spreads. Why cross-functional tabletop exercises rarely work, and how to fix them in 30 minutes or less. Most teams simulate what they already know. Action exercises simulate what they ignore. The shift? You simulate not the breach, but the moment you realize you've been wrong for 3 months and what you're going to do next. Finally, the true reason executives smile and nod at your strategy and then ultimately do nothing. You presented the risk, you showed the ROI, you got buy-in, and then radio silence. Traction teaches the 4 embedded resistance frames inside every executive. So you don't just explain security, you negotiate its implementation. The magic isn't in the data, it's the delivery. And most security people never even know it exists. ACT gives you the lens, action gives you the tools, and traction gives you the leverage. If you're ready for that level of capability, and not just clarity, then your next step isn't another tool, tactic, or change. It's here. You can register right now for the ACT Anti-Fragile Security Masterclass, and you'll get a whole new playbook for CISOs and security architects, because you already know the world is fragile. The question is whether or not you're ready to stop being surprised by it. My name is Andrew Townley, the founder and chief executive of Archistry, and I look forward to seeing you in the next masterclass.